Hi, I'm Keanu Reeves.
Welcome back, sir.
So what's your podcast about?
Oh, it's about psychology, true crime, supernatural stuff, the occasional paranormal or philosophical rant.
Well, maybe I could check it out sometime.
The choices we make, the worlds we build, they also confront us with questions about why we want to choose this over that, why we want to make X instead of Y. Where do ideas of who we are and what we want even come from?
Dreams mean everything. They're the stories we tell ourselves of what could be, who we could become.
For instance, I'm not even sure why I'm here. I remember waking up and thinking that I'm supposed to come here. That it was important for me to ask people. How do we know what is real?
Have you ever had a dream that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real one?
We are living in a computer-programmed reality.
Find me when you wake up.
Welcome to the real world.
This is your nautical lantern on the dangerous seas of darkness. Let's push off from the placid shore of the status quo and explore what's beyond the horizon. I am your host, BT, and this is Truth and Shadow, your podcast of the supernatural.
The thing about the future is that people imagine it arriving all at once. They imagine sirens, they imagine declarations. They might even imagine some impossible morning when they wake up, look out their window, and discover that the world they knew had vanished. It was replaced by chrome towers, synthetic citizens, and machines that can pass for human. We've been trained by movies to expect transformation to announce itself with spectacle. History, on the other hand, suggests otherwise. History suggests that the future rarely arrives like an invasion. More often it arrives like a bad habit. It slips quietly into the daily routines of ordinary people until nobody can remember when things were different. I've been thinking about a future that doesn't exist yet, though perhaps that is giving the present too much credit. Maybe it already exists in fragments, scattered throughout our world like pieces of a puzzle that no one wants to assemble. A world where the distinction between what is real and what is artificial has become so blurred that asking the question itself begins to sound old-fashioned. A world where technology no longer serves humanity but instead becomes the environment within which humanity exists. A world where the machine is not a tool but is the atmosphere. The remarkable thing is that when people hear a description like that, they assume that the danger lies in the machine. I don't. Machines have always done what they were designed to do. The more interesting question has always been what human beings are designing themselves to become. Imagine a society that has become so technologically sophisticated that it can manufacture companions, emotions, experiences, and even forms of life. At first glance, that sounds like triumph, that man has become gods. It sounds like the fulfillment of every promise made by the modern age. It's the conquest of scarcity. It's the elimination of loneliness, the replacement of uncertainty with efficiency. Yet every time civilization acquires the ability to solve a problem, it creates a temptation to eliminate something else in the process. What if solving loneliness, we eliminate relationship? What if solving uncertainty, we eliminate wonder? What if, in solving suffering, we eliminate meaning? These are not technological questions, they are spiritual questions disguised as engineering. They are philosophical questions disguised as science. The older I get, the more convinced I've become that human beings possess a peculiar talent for misunderstanding their own inventions. We create something because it appears useful, then discover decades later that its greatest impact occurred in places we never thought to examine. The automobile. It changed transportation, but it also changed community. Television changed entertainment, but it also changed our attention span. The internet changed communication, but it also changed our identity. Every technology alters not only what we do, but how we think about ourselves. Artificial intelligence may prove to be no different. Everyone wants to know whether machines will become conscious. Everyone wants to know whether an artificial mind will eventually awaken and demand equality. It is a fascinating question, but I suspect it is not the most important one. The more pressing concern may be whether human beings are becoming less conscious while the machines are becoming more sophisticated. We live in a culture increasingly devoted to convenience. Convenience sounds harmless because, well, it is often harmless. Nobody objects to a washing machine. Nobody objects to a calculator. Nobody objects to technology that removes unnecessary burdens from everyday life. The problem emerges when convenience ceases to be a tool and becomes something more. Once convenience becomes the highest value, every inconvenience becomes to appear as a defect. Even other people begin to look suspiciously insufficient. Real relationships are difficult. Real communities are difficult. Real families are difficult. They require compromise, forgiveness, sacrifice, and endurance. They consume time. They generate frustration. They resist optimization. Yet those very inefficiencies are often the source of their value. Sure, a machine can simulate companionship. It may eventually do so extraordinarily well. It may learn your preferences, remember your history, anticipate your emotional needs, and tailor every interaction specifically to your desires. It may become, in some respects, the perfect companion. That possibility should terrify us, not because the machine has become human, but because the definition of companionship has become mechanical. A friendship that never challenges us is not a friendship. A relationship that exists solely to satisfy our preferences is not a relationship. It's a service. The danger is not that machines will become people. The danger is that people will begin expecting one another to behave like machines. When that happens, every human flaw becomes intolerable. Every disagreement, a malfunction. Every inconvenience, an offense. Every weakness, some kind of software error requiring an update. Look around. We inhabit systems increasingly designed to predict our behavior. Algorithms determine what we read, what we watch, what we purchase, what we often believe. Entire industries are devoted to understanding human psychology at a level previous generations could scarcely imagine. Every click becomes data. Every preference, a profile. Every hesitation, information that you probably don't even need. People often speak of surveillance as though it consists of shadowy agents watching from darkened rooms, black vans. Well, perhaps it did once. The modern version is far more elegant. It doesn't merely observe behavior, it anticipates it. That changes everything. When a system understands your desires, fears, biases, and vulnerabilities better than you do, manipulation no longer requires force. It merely requires a suggestion. The individual remains convinced he is exercising freedom, even while moving predictably through pathways designed by unseen architects. We know more than any generation in history. We possess more information than entire civilizations once accumulated over centuries. Yet information alone has never guaranteed understanding. A library contains information, a sage contains wisdom. The two are not the same. Machines may eventually contain more information than all of humanity combined. That fact alone tells us nothing about whether the future will be humane. Yet beneath that surface, something essential could be disappearing. It could be the ability to encounter reality, to suffer, grow, to wonder, to love another person not because they satisfy our preferences, but because they're real. Perhaps that is the ultimate lesson hidden within these visions of the future. The greatest threat posed by artificial intelligence is not that it will become like us. The greatest threat is that we may become like it. We may slowly redefine ourselves according to the logic of our own creations until efficiency becomes our morality, optimization becomes our philosophy, and data becomes our understanding of the soul. If that future ever arrives, the tragedy will not be that the machines won. The tragedy will be that nobody noticed the difference.
There are moments when science stops asking how and starts wondering if we should. When artificial intelligence begins to mirror human memory and technology dares to treat death as an engineering challenge rather than a boundary. This conversation lives in that space where systems built for control intersect with the oldest human desire, to return from the dead. Drawn from decades spent inside high-level institutions and a mind trained to see consequences others overlooked, our guest helps us explore what happens when resurrection becomes procedural, when consciousness is archived, and when machines inherit decisions once left to God. The question isn't whether it's possible. The question is, what wakes us up when we succeed? That's why we're going to talk to someone who's taken these questions into science fiction, someone who's lived inside systems of command and secrecy, and then turned around to imagine what happens when technology dares to resurrect the human soul. A strategist of consequence and a storyteller of thresholds, a watcher of systems and a chronicler of what breaks when they go too far. John, welcome to Truth and Shadow Podcast.
Thanks, Brandon. Thank you for having me on your show.
Of course, thank you for coming to me all the way from Australia. So let's talk about you for a little bit. Tell the audience first more about who you are and any kind of links that you would like to drop for websites or anything in particular of note you want to mention here in your intro. Feel free to do so.
Right. Well, I am a retired Air Force officer and 42 years of service. So I've been in uniform even before I joined the workforce. I was in I think you call it the ROTC. So I was in the cadets while I was in high school. So yeah, it's a long time in uniform. But I did enjoy it. It was sometimes I think looking back, it was a means to an end, but it was a worthwhile career, and I certainly thought I was doing something worthwhile. So let's just say no need to look back. I have no problem with my past. But when I retired, writing is something I've always wanted to do. But being in the military, it's quite demanding of your time. So I really never, even though I tried once, I never really got the opportunity to kickstart my writing. So as soon as I retired, I I thought, well, now's the best opportunity. So I actually did a couple of comprehensive writing courses to, or creative writing courses to, uh, because it's a mindset shift. So, you know, that very logical style of thinking that you need in the military doesn't always work on paper. So, um, so I just wanted to make sure I was in the right headspace to be able to write creatively. I mean, I've considered myself to be a creative person most of my life. You know, always putting pen to paper and drawing and, you know, that sort of thing, which I enjoyed. But again, never the time. So once I retired, put my hand to writing, and I started writing my first book, which is Chronic Dreams Awakening. It's the first of a trilogy, and it took me a while being the first, and considering I was doing those courses as well at the same time, but I got there, and I'm pleased with my work. And this book is one of a trilogy now. So, and I'm getting close to finishing my second. So hopefully by mid next year, the second book will be out. In terms of website, I'd have created a website based around cryonic dreams, and the website is johnrcarlos.com.au. Don't forget the .au, because being in Australia, you need that. Otherwise, you won't find it. But yeah, yeah. So it's been a long time coming. So, but I finally got it out there, and I enjoyed writing it. It was a buzz. I mean, it's a dystopian future. So I hope there is no prophecy in my writing.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting to look through this because one of my favorite dystopian authors is Philip K. Dick. And there's quite a lot of these little things, you know, and people may be familiar with like the movie Minority Report or something. And it's this the way it is in the future, and you're kind of looking at these possibilities, and as we continue to kind of go forward, things like 1984 by Orwell, they're not so much as guides, they're playbooks, and you're like, oh man, this probably shouldn't be happening. So for you, what was it that you looked at and you go, hey, this is something that if taken down this road is going to fall into dystopia?
It's a good question. You know, the kernel of the idea for chronic dreams was actually a bad dream, and so and that bad dream was that it was, you know, in this dream there was this cryo chamber and this woman who wakes up, right, and the chamber door opens, or the pod door opens, if you like, and she steps out into this dark room and starts walking forward. And at some point in this bad dream, I trade places with her, and I can see the darkness in front of me and these hands coming up from the floor and these voices saying, you don't belong, you don't belong. So from the moment I woke up, I thought, oh, I got to use this in a story. But and that, so chronic dreams, that's basically how it starts, and that's the main protagonist is waking up or reanimating a woman out of cryopreservation. But what led me to write the story the way I did was it was a number of things, right? there were, and when I got the ideas for this before um, the COVID lockdowns and that sort of thing. So, in the story there is a pandemic. So, and again, I don't think I was being prophetic. I was looking at what dystopian future I was going to write my world into. So I decided on a pandemic, and sure enough, 6 months later, we were in the middle of COVID. So, but the one of the things I did do with chronic dreams is I created a mind map of the variables of causation, I call it, and it's just all the variables throughout human history that have sort of pushed us towards where we are now. And then from that, I created a key variables framework, and which then allowed me to model potential futures. And I came up with the timeline that's in the front of the book. So, and there were a lot of scary things in there. And when you look at what's happening today, and as you say, 1984 was supposed to be a warning, not a handbook to how to run civilization. But there seems to be many things pointing us down towards this, and so and faster than I had imagined as well. So if you look at the timeline in the beginning of the book, you can see there's some quite horrific and scary things, and I just hope we don't end up there. I think that answers your question.
There's quite a bunch of things that people are thinking about every time a new technology comes along, from radio to television to internet, computers, so on and so forth. There's always been this group of individuals who find that there's easily a dark side to the technology, and quite honestly, there has been dark stuff that has happened throughout the use of new inventions, radio, television, internet, etc. And when we start looking at what's going on now, and we're looking at what AI is capable of doing, and the ideas that AI may be replacing some jobs, that has to cause a little bit of dissonance in people's lives today. I think you speak about that.
Yes, I do. And in the book, the causational pathway that I've taken is that robotics and AI will transform the global working landscape irreversibly. It will automate absolutely everything you can possibly think of. We will be looking to create alternative ways to giving our lives meaning. And in the book, it suggests that we don't succeed very well, and that nihilism is very, very prevalent in the world that I've created.
No, yeah, because there's quite a bunch of stuff here with the idea of artificial intelligence robotics, which is kind of the same, two heads of the same coin. It mirrors this experiment done by this guy, Calhoun, Universe 25, where he puts a bunch of rats basically in an enclosed system where they have unlimited amounts of food, unlimited amount of water, everything that could make a rat happy. Over a period of time, every single time the experiment occurs, the same outcome happens. There's a societal collapse. There's no new baby rats being made. There's things like cannibalism and intense physical things that go on with against these rats. And so you look at this, and even though Dr. Calhoun tried to create a utopia, this perfect environment is not. It's an anti-utopia. You have everything you want. You have all the money you ever need. You have anything you want to do, you can just focus on it. And what happens is the society of rats becomes deplorables. And that kind of seems what you're warning against.
Yeah, absolutely. I the biggest point I try to make is that as human beings, we need to have purpose in our lives. Yes, we need our basic needs met. They're fundamental to our survival. But beyond that, we need to have a sense of purpose, a structure and a sense of purpose to give meaning to our lives. Um, that's why I very much believe in faith and liberty to be able to give people the freedom to find their own purpose in life.
Well, I mean, coming out of cryo sleep is a little bit different than resurrection. I mean, obviously, we don't really have somebody who's completely dead in that sense, being frozen. So we have a lot of stories where people are brought out of some kind of cryo chamber. Demolition Man is the one that comes to mind right off the top of my head. But this is your protagonist, and she's, what is this, 130 some years into the future from when she's frozen? Is that about right?
Yeah, well, that's why it's you got to remember it's in a trilogy. So when Marianne, who's the protagonist that's frozen, she's just one of the protagonists. Michelle Brown, the doctor who reanimates her, is the main protagonist. The story is mainly through her perspective. But Marianne, when she first wakes up, she has no idea because she has amnesia. She basically can't remember. And you're right to pick out resurrection, because resurrection, using that term, is very dramatic. It dramatizes the whole thing. Because the only way, me doing the research behind this, the only way to successfully reanimate somebody is you can't freeze somebody that's been dead for 3 days and then think that you can bring them back in the future. It's like somebody that dies of a heart attack in front of you, and you immediately apply CPR, and you can revive that person, because if you're so inclined, that person still has their soul inside their body, right? If anything after about 10 minutes, and there's nothing left but a shell. So to successfully reanimate somebody, you've got to either cryopreserve them either before they die or just after they die. So, and that's why you will find that most cryopreservation these days is done within the first 8 to 10 minutes of death. So, and the smaller that window you make it, the better, because the brain starts to, after about 4 or 5 minutes, the brain starts to die. So, those are all important time frames. But as the story goes on, and Marianne ultimately remembers, yes, then she is hit with the stark reality of what the world has become, and it's chalk and cheese. It's black and white for her. Although she was seeing the writing on the wall, which is, and if you delve into her backstory, then you will see that she was aware of what was.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this idea, right? I mean, I really think that there's actual people who've tried like this cryo stuff. You can read about it. There's people who are like, "Hey, I've been frozen. Maybe in the future they're gonna be able to figure out how to cure my cancer or whatever it is." But it's not so far fetched. I mean, the idea for that basis. My first exposure was reading the story about Carl Tanzler back in the 1930s, like tries to bring back his soulmate, predestined soulmate, he'd call her, Elena Hoyos from Cuba. She died of like tuberculosis. And he went so far as like exhumed her body, fixes her up, Dr. Frankenstein style. He uses wax, wire, glass eyes. He perfumes her body so it doesn't smell like death, decay. He like slept beside it for years. I mean, he was trying to do some kind of reanimation using things like electricity, radiation, occult stuff. And in fiction, this is similar to H.P. Lovecraft. He writes a story about the reanimator. So it's kind of like there's all of these ideas within people's minds. Like it goes all the way back. Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, the idea that you can their monster wasn't like the stitched together, we see on Young Frankenstein or something. It was completely a different situation. And people are fascinated with this, fascinated with being able to bring something back from the dead. So much so that even someone like Tansler in the 30s does this.
Look, whether science will ever get to a point where we can reanimate somebody who's been dead for some time, I really don't know. I think what you will find is that science will, before that happens, science will find a way to extend our lives for a very, very long time. Because that's easy. Just fix fix the bits that are breaking now so that you last longer, rather than trying to fix everything after you're already dead. So, and we're already seeing that now in, supplement drugs, anti-aging supplements, and things like that. So, and they will keep us fitter, healthier, longer. So that's the direction science is going in. Having said that, looking through the lens of my story, is that these commodities will become expensive, and they will be available to the rich only. So for the masses, you'll see that these technologies and these treatments will become more and more scarce for the general public because they're harder to come by, they're more expensive. And even now, the supplements you can buy now do add up. They're not overly expensive, but they do add up. So they wouldn't be available to absolutely everyone. So, and that's the way I see it going. So it's an interesting. The whole idea of death is something that no one likes to confront, because it's our inevitability. And even if we did learn to fix ourselves so we didn't die, or we died, or we lived, centuries, you could still die through accidents, right? And whether science will ever get to that point, I really don't know. I haven't done enough research in that space to believe, even speculatively, that we would achieve it. I mean, that is really still in the long distance, in the realms of long distance science.
Sure, right. Yeah, one of the things I really like about being able to write creatively, and it doesn't matter the genre we're writing in, it's this ability to create and envision a world however we want to make, because it's our sandbox. We can play in it however we want. And at the same time, as a writer myself, I sometimes come into things in my own life that I really need to work on this and think this thing through. And I could put it into narration. I could put it into creative writing, and I can explore avenues and aspects of an idea that may be bothering me within your own writing. John, since this is your new thing here, did you find yourself at times relating to characters in this kind of way, exploring these things through their eyes?
Well, yes. I think you're right, in that, uh, when you start writing and you start trying to put yourself in other people's shoes, other perspectives, under different circumstances, you don't always know how it turns out. So you have to think about it. It forces you to think about it a lot more deeply. And I think what that does to your own self is that it makes you more aware of your own actions, and limitations. In fact, um, you know, being in the military, I was always focused on the mission, right? And so you really don't have a lot of time to dwell on yourself or your family, or things like that. I mean, you do, but the job is number one, and so that's where your focus is. So you really don't. Certainly, I did, um, because it was a case of focus on the work, go to work. You do long hours in the end, and then you come home, you go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and it starts again. So you don't get a lot of time to dwell on yourself or your actions or what you've done, what you haven't done, and in your personal and domestic life. So so when you do actually start writing and throw yourself into this world creation, um, then you really have to stop and think, and that's helped me think about my own actions. But it is writing has been something I've really enjoyed, though, because in throwing yourself into that world, it as you say, so many possibilities. It's just endless, and you try and create, and you slowly build this superstructure of the world that you think is going to house the your characters, and their mystery, uh, you know their adventure, that sort of thing. So it's in. I found a lot of fun, as much as I reflected.
Yeah, that would mean also you're going to be looking at things like ethical implications of what's going on in your story. So, I mean, with that, you know, you're crafting a world here, and you're making this dystopian situation. You have to give us the reader. You're giving the reader something here, and it's the story, right? And we have to come to terms as we read it, kind of with our own little perspective. But you, as the world creator here, you as the author, what kind of implications, ethical, were you looking at with the ideas you're putting forth in this novel?
Well, when you first come up with the idea, you do have a line in the sand. You think, well, it's going to be this, it's going to include that, these things, and then you create your characters, and you give them a backstory, how old they are, what job they have, their troubles in their lives, is that sort of back history of, or that backbone, if you like, of who these people are, and then you start writing. You create a scene in this world, um, and the scene explores not just the character but the world, and the circumstances of that scene. So, which is why, one of the things I always say is, when you start writing, you have to be prepared to do a lot of rewriting, because when you throw your characters into a scene, and and put them into a particular circumstance, you're not exactly certain how they're going to react. You got to take their characteristics into account, and then look at the circumstances, and and then you get their outcome. So there's a lot of rewriting. But in terms of the world, um, it's when you get into a scene and there are these complications of the world, then you might have to do a bit of research. Right? So, the whole cryonics, I did research behind that, artificial intelligence, all the technologies that I explore in the story. But as you say, also the ethics, and this is where I I explored these things in my key variables framework after creating the mind map. Looking at the state of the world today and the ethics of those of where we're at, and then extrapolating that into the future. So that gives me an understanding of how authoritarian or how much freedom the characters are going to have in this particular scene. So these complications run deep, and you've got to give them some thought, but you don't always cover it. So, which is again, once you finish your first draft, you always come back and reread, and you find inevitably that you rewrite because you work out a way of making it deeper, more interesting, more intriguing. So, and I'm still learning that.
Yeah, because you decided to go ahead and take this story and make it into a trilogy. So if you've had to plot out a lot of stuff to give the reader over 3 books, why'd you want to do that?
Well, I hadn't really intended on doing that. I wrote the story, like the first couple of drafts were one book, and with a satisfactory ending, you might say. But in discussion with my editor, because we're trying to condense the, because you can't, they don't want anything over about 140,000 words. So, so, um, so we're trying to condense, and we got to condense a little bit. But in the end, I said, look, if we can't condense anymore, because otherwise there are bits we're cutting out of the story that are fundamental to the whole plot. So, so, well, she said, okay, well then turn it into 2 books. And I said, okay. So I basically split it in half in logical sort of ending areas, because the first part takes place entirely on Earth. The second book takes place entirely on Mars, or almost. And so, uh, yeah, so, but once I had turned it into 2 books, I thought about the history, which is the timeline that I've created in the front of the book. That's the history of the story. So I thought I really need to delve back into this to completely finish the story. There is an ending of sorts at once the second book concludes, but really to finish the entire political narrative that I've created, that it really needs a third story, and which is why in the end I said I'm going to make it a trilogy.
That's good. That's good. So you're visioning this having that development through a series of process. I like that. That works really well, John. I know we bounced around a little bit talking about different things, but I would like you to talk about real life things that has inspired you for different parts, right? I mean, you could talk about this first novel here, but talk about the other things that are inspiring books 2 and 3 to get as a teaser for the audience.
look, I've always been a science fiction fan, so I've and I'm basically a visual person, so I tend to go towards movies rather than books. Although I do enjoy reading books as well. But so for me, looking at our possible future ahead of us, I thought, well, the moon and Mars are our next logical steps if we ever want to leave our this Earth, right? Because and I heard the term years ago, and it's still relevant today because we are so diverse and so different. Earth is it's a pressure cooker, right? And it's always boiling away um, with conflict or with political indifference, or it's just always on the boil. So I personally believe we need to extend our humanity away from Earth and create other opportunities for us. So I wanted to write about that. And for me, Mars was the logical, the moon and Mars, although Mars being having uh, some gravity and a little bit, even though it's cold, uh, it's got an atmosphere and a place that at some point we could probably terraform with enough technology. And in fact, I'll share this with you. There's another timeline in the beginning of the second book. Well, there will be in the beginning of the third book. But in the second book, the timeline will be very much more specific to Mars and its development and the things that happen. Because by the year 2169, which is the story where it's setting, um, Mars is well on the way to being terraformed. And so these are the things I believe we need to do to give ourselves a future, give ourselves hope for a future. If we stay here, um, I mean, you just look at the different political points of view and the globalist points of view, and and you know, you and I, we're just common folk, and these people with money and power, you imagine the damage they can inflict on this planet. So, and that's why I think it makes sense to get ourselves off it, to give ourselves future and a hope. But there is one proviso, and that is that I believe we need to have the technology of rotating space stations because they are the only way we can maintain uh, uh, our health in microgravity environments. And I believe that, say, if you work on Lunar or if you work on Mars, you will have to rotate yourself through an artificial gravity environment to return your health back to normal. So that has to be part of the solution as much as us moving off.
Yeah, it's the idea. I like that idea about exploring a Mars idea. That's awesome because I was, you're talking about if I keep in line with dystopian, the dystopian Mars movie is Total Recall, right? The Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's I mean, is it that they're at Mars? Are they not at Mars? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But these ideas within our own human longings to explore, whether we're watching Star Trek or we're participating in our imaginations with 2001: A Space Odyssey or whatever we're doing, And whatever we're exploring through fiction, the idea that we can kind of see two ideas. There could be a golden kind of age, Star Trek-y kind of thing, and then there could be this dystopian Total Recall idea with Mars. And so it's really nice to be able to look at these two things and put ourselves within the bubble of science fiction, because that gives us a fence, right? We have to stay within the realm of possibilities. Like you mentioned, rotating space stations, the creation of artificial gravity until something like deck plating, whatever, can be invented or whatever. But you have to be rotating. I mean, the reason why we have gravity on Earth is it has to do with the rotation, it has to do with a lot of little things, right? And to mimic that, I mean, it's just, that's just science fact at this point. And I think that that's really something interesting. And you're pulling on a lot of really good threads by talking about creating believable characters in believable environments doing believable things.
Well, that's what I've gone for, and hopefully what I've created. I mean, the feedback I've gotten from the book has been really good so far. So I think I've, you know, the for being my first book, I think it's doing very well. And me doing these podcasts is about, just making more people aware that the book is out there. But,
Well, not
yeah,
just that
look,
the book is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna just go on, but you're right about for us to get off this world, the we do need to look at and give ourselves hope. We really do need to look at getting ourselves to the moon and Mars, and look at what we need, or the human body needs, to make that.
Yeah, there's something really good with that, is the idea of hope, because I mean that really ties back into that idea of if everything is taken care of and we have to have a purpose. Well, we don't just have to have a purpose, we also have to have a hope, a purpose and a hope. And so it's like, when you have when you're listless, you have no goals. There's a lot of studies on this, what happens to humans. I mentioned Universe 25 for rats. I mean, it's real simple to see that degradation of society occurs when there's no longer any hope.
No, absolutely, I agree with 100%. So, and you know, these sorts of things, questions are reflected in the story as well, because there, at one point, the characters do go through this idea that um, life has become meaningless and they've reached the end and there's no more hope. But then you always have to remind yourself that hope only dies is when we let it die. Um, so you just got to keep yourself moving forward and hoping that the future is better. And as long as you strive towards that possibility, um, um, I think that you would find meaning and purpose along the way.
Yeah, and speaking of meaning, John, being able to take the opportunity to write. You love science fiction. This is something you've been into, and you had this long military career, and you're here, and you've written down something, and there's a lot of people out there that are like, "Gosh, I'd really like to write a story, but I don't have the time," or I don't think it's gonna be any good. You had to overcome those hurdles. I mean, I'm pretty sure I go through that. I mean, every single author is going to go, this is not, and nobody comes out born to be an author. So, how do you overcome these ideas, and what kind of things are you encouraging new writers or those who are like on the fence?
Well, I tried to look at it logically, and like I said at the beginning, the military mindset is very forthright and logical. So uh, the first thing I did was, what do I need to make sure that I can at least, um, write something successfully? And that's when I decided to do the courses. I looked around, shopped around, and I found the courses that I thought would give me what I needed. And there's a lot out there, but and I did it. So that at least put me in the right creative mind, um, to make a start. Then the rest is, um, uh, just putting pen to paper and writing. One of the things I did, which I think was successful, and I mean, if you can afford it, I think you should. One of the courses I did, because there was several. I think I did three or four. But um, the courses I did was first draft. The course went for 10 months, and it helps you write your first draft of a story, right? Because not only do you have uh, a framework to work with that they provide, but you also have a coach, because your tutor is always coaching you. They're saying, "Yep, this is really good. We can work with this, or I think we should change this or that, or think about this or that," and it really tries to direct you into the author mindset, if you like. And but that coaching over that period, I found absolutely very useful, because then it's not just my own thoughts, providing feedback on my work, right? And so, and I found that very helpful, very, very, very helpful. So it is a little bit expensive doing it that way, but if you can do it, I'd say go ahead and do it, because I mean, one of the things, when I finally finished the book, and everybody, including my ex tutor and my editor, they all said, "Well done, what a milestone, fantastic." So um, so that's just the start. Then you got to find a publisher, and I so that I decided very early that I was going to do a hybrid publishing. Um, so because otherwise you're forever hunting down publishers, and you're going to find hundreds, if not thousands, of them are going to say no, sorry. And particularly on science fiction is not necessarily a go-to genre. So so I just decided from the outset I was going to do hybrid publishing. So I found a publisher, and the next hurdle was, on day of release of the book, I looked online and I said, "Show me new releases," and there was an ocean of new releases. So, and I thought to myself, well, how am I going to get anyone to find my book amongst all these? And why would anybody want to pick up my book instead of somebody else's book? And I said, well, I need some marketing and some advertising, which is, it's, you got to do it. You just got to do it. But they're the things I went through in developing my own style, and overcoming the problems that you described. And you do, even while you're writing that first draft, you think, which rewriting is so important, because you will write something, you think, ah, that's crap.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right. You will do
rub it
that.
out, start again, and you keep moving, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going. And I think ultimately, if you allow yourself to be a little bit stubborn, then you will eventually get there.
That's great stuff, man. It's true. I agree 100% with you. Being able to go through and have courses available to, well, not just courses, but having encouragement along the way, even after you're done with a product, being able to have someone who can publicize for you. I mean, that's an amazing thing to be able to reach out and have someone, through your publishing company to go, hey, let's line you up with some people to talk to and get your book out there, because you're right. Science fiction is pretty low on the desire list. It's true crime and romance. I mean, that's what it is. I mean,
That's the most popular. Yeah.
and your demographic is women. So I mean, it's like the vast majority of novel readers are women, and the vast majority of women read true crime or romance. I mean, it's just that's what it is. And the thing is you love sci-fi, you love fantasy, whatever it is you're into. There's no reason to stop doing what you love, man. You have to have a passion, and this is yours, and you got three of them to do. And I mean, are you thinking about doing anything else at the same time? I mean, a lot of us have, I don't know how many stories I have started,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, but I've already started another story completely different from the trilogy. It's called Evil Under a Twilight Star. So that's also science fiction, but very, very different from the trilogy. And I'll probably end up writing that after the second part and before the third part of this trilogy. So we'll see how we go.
All right. Well, as we wind down, there's just a couple things: is the name of your book, your website, and I mean, if there are readers who are reading your stuff and they want to contact you, do you have that available? Is that through your site or is that through your publicist? What do you have available for the audience?
Okay. Well, just your audience won't see this, but you can. So, Chronic Dreams Awakening is the first part of the trilogy. Hopefully, next June you will get part two, which is called When Mars Breaks. And the third installment will be Martian Revelations. So, um, yeah, so you will find all that information on my website, which is johnrcarlos.au.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's definitely going to be in the show notes, so people won't miss it. They don't have to jot it down. So I'm going to have it in the show notes, but it's great to have people hear it.
I was going to say, do you want a quick rundown of the story?
Oh, by all means, you can take a couple minutes and do that for the audience. That'd be great.
So at the heart of the story, we have Dr. Michelle Brown, who is the main protagonist. She's a brilliant but damaged scientist whose breakthrough in cryonics promises to change the course of medicine. But even as Michelle is about to succeed, everything appears to conspire against her, and she quickly finds herself caught in a web of sabotage, institutional betrayal, and the shadow ambitions of those who pull the strings. There's a bit of mystery here because her boss goes missing, and then there is a murder a little bit later on. So I've tried to bring those things into the story as well. So, but Michelle fights to protect her research and her revived patient, Marianne Kendricks, whose true identity is hidden, wrapped in a centuries-old secret. She's forced to confront not just the technical and ethical challenges of reanimating someone who was deceased, but also the relentless interference of powerful agencies and corporations. Struggling to stay ahead, Michelle is confronted with betrayal, murder, conspiracy, viral infection, death, and mutation. These aren't just obstacles; they're part of a much larger system designed to suppress and keep humanity firmly under control. The story unfolds against the backdrop of 2 decades-long pandemic, artificial intelligence, humanoid robots, and off-world colonies. The machinery of a new world order built to serve the ambitions of those in power at the expense of the general population. Michelle's journey, along with her friends Marianne, Jackson, Holly, and others, are very much meant to be a microcosm of humanity's struggle against tyranny and the unforeseen and the unseen forces controlling our society. What I think makes the story compelling is that it asks the big questions. It's not just about the science, cryonics, or the future technologies, but about the moral responsibilities that come with power, the ethical dilemmas of manipulating life and identity, the consequences of surrendering autonomy to systems built to dominate. I consistently put the characters in circumstances where they must choose between compliance and resistance, comfort and conviction, survival and truth. And just to finish, as Awakening comes to a close, Michelle and her companions are driven from a collapsing Earth, pursued by the agency who is determined to suppress the truth and rewrite themselves into global control. They escape to Mars, carrying with them not just the secrets of the past, but the hope that resistance, reflection, and the refusal to be defined by others still shape the future. So that covers everything we spoke about.
It does. It does indeed. That's good. Yeah, John, it was a really good conversation. I really do appreciate your time, and kind of a quick aside, you had mentioned that the editors or publishing companies are really looking for around 144,000 and not more. I did a real quick search here, and Dune by Frank Herbert was at 188,000 words. So I can understand why at 500 pages somebody's like, let's not make them that big.
Yeah, mine turned out to be 450, and that
beautiful.
Was on the verge of being too much.
Yeah, well, that's great. I appreciate your time, John. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
We cling to memories as if they define us, but they really don't. What we do is what defines us.
After all you've seen, after all the evidence, why can't you believe?
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
It's a very strange, funny time where everybody would love to be able to be themselves, but they can't. Because they must fall in line with the person in front of them.
The terrible thing about searching for the truth is that sometimes you find it.
You take the red pill. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You stay in Wonderland. Believe whatever you want to believe.
See, the more at peace you become, the less you tolerate chaos. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you.
You want to live that kind of life, I wish you the best. I'll be on the other side somewhere.
Protecting your peace isn't about shutting the world out. It's about keeping your inner world clear enough to hear your own soul.
The truth. Nothing more.